I had breakfast in Asheville this morning at 6:30.
Well, you don't sleep, so that
No, I
doesn't
don't
count.
sleep.
Not at all.
I'm not sleep.
Well, why don't we go ahead?
If you
and
got
start
that
on
long
this,
time ago, Charlie.
Just to make sure we got enough staff people, plus a double screen TV and a screen on the wall.
This is our 2D2 or something.
Make sure we
If
got
you need more, let us know, we'll get you some more.
Yeah, we can put it on the
Okay,
camera.
Diane, why don't you, obviously the issue today is the budget, but can you give us, before we start with the budget, can you give us your monthly update?
I can.
And do you have extra copies to hand out, or is it in the
Or
packet?
telephone.
It should be in the
I apologize.
packet. It's
I
item
can do my
4
own budget, so.
in the packet.
There would be back.
They have some right there.
Did you need
There you go,
that?
it is in here, good.
I can go get
It's
some.
not numbered, but we're good.
They just wasn't out there.
Well, how come I didn't put mine?
It's,
Do we need copies? I'd be glad to.
I just did it, I put it in order.
We'll give you the page number, but.
There you go.
Hey,
It's in reverse.
nailed it.
It's in reverse order.
All right, so everybody, where we need to be, item 4, revenue expense projections through June of 2013. All right, first of all, we'll deal with April. In April, we had, on the waiver side, we had a surplus, a net surplus of $700,000. That was a little lower than normal, and I want to talk about that just for a second, just so everybody's kind of clear. We get paid supplemental payments. It's $4.84 PM. We started getting that in January, supplemental payments for the hospitals. That ultimately has to be negotiated before the end of the calendar year with the hospitals. It has to do with the rural hospitals and some sort of agreement that DMA has with those hospitals to provide supplemental payments, just so they're there, basically. And so, historically, that has not been in the PMPM. That came into the PMPM in January, and we were pretty unclear in January exactly what we did with that and how that got paid, and so we've gotten some clarity on that. So what we did is we accrued January through April of that money. Now, it will ultimately be negotiated, so it could be lower. We accrued the entire amount, which is around $300,000 a month, so it's $1.2 million for those 4 months. And it'll be $300,000 roughly going, it'll go up or down a little bit, but.
So it's just a pass-through money, maybe, and they make something.
Well, yes, I mean, potentially I would assume that we would not negotiate above what we had received ultimately. That's what I'm assuming.
Maybe that's the question.
So the statements here include that $300,000 expense through April, and then carry it forward as an anticipated expense through the June 30 numbers here. Okay. And so that's probably embedded somewhere your negative 2.6 million total?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. And of course, that's a total.
For the 18 months,
For the
right?
18 months,
So
yes.
it's quite a bit better than the January through June total of negative 6.7.
Right.
All right.
Right. Yeah, and what we did is we booked that to the inpatient expense line item, so it is in the service expenditure. And going forward, like I said, it will be $300,000. It won't be the $1.2 million because we had to catch that up. So even doing that, we still ended up with a $700,000 surplus. So I just wanted to be sure that I was clear there on that one. Projecting out May through June, for the 18-month window, we're projecting about a $2 million surplus. Now that's a little lower than what we've been seeing, but of course that we're likely over accrued on service expense. I've been putting there's additional $500,000 in there for, what we don't know, basically.
The board took an action in May to direct that funds be paid back to the state side, if you will, the non-Medicaid side, for the advances that were made. Has that action occurred yet?
We have, did you book a due to and a due from? We haven't done that yet.
Well, it's on the,
I apologize.
it's on the balance sheet.
Okay. So,
Okay.
so
So,
yes,
yes, it
it
has.
did move on the balance sheet.
All right.
Um, Can you-
Will the cash actually transfer on the balance sheet by June 30 then, with all remaining, all available cash? That any surplus cash in the Medicaid then will transfer to pay back the non-Medicaid side? On June
Well,
30.
to balance those up, yeah, ultimately,
If
that
you, if you look at the balance sheet where I separate the waiver and the state, you'll see it there. Because on the balance sheet where I do separate the state and the waiver side, there is a negative on the waiver side and a positive on the state side. That's where you'll be able to see it. It is being calculated separately.
Okay.
So it'll be able to
Let me-
pay it back.
Let me be very clear. On June 30, will the cash show on the non-Medicaid side as much as possible so that it's covered, that we used with non-Medicaid money to pay for the losses in the Medicaid side during that first year? Is that cash going to transfer so that there's a zero balance if necessary on Medicaid?
from one side of the balance sheet to
Right.
the other, I mean, the cash isn't gonna go to any other
I
account.
know, but you see what I'm holding is that I want to
Yes.
make sure that we don't transfer a negative balance in one, where we can pay it off, and basically owe in another one where it was the cash, it was the loaning agency, if you will, the loaning side. I
Right,
want to make sure that's washed out by June 30, or as much as humanly possible washed out.
right,
So that the strength of it, the organization was in the non-Medicaid side after, that's what paid things off, paid the bills. I want to make sure that's the side of the transfer is strong.
right.
Okay.
We will, let me answer this as succinctly as I can right now. We will have to do it within the guidance of the auditors. It should be, it should not be an issue to do that,
Right.
but it will have to be under their guidance once they do the audit.
That makes sense, okay.
Is that-
I understand what you're saying, yeah, I mean.
Yeah,
The audited books will show it has happened.
Okay.
we can do it, but they will audit it, so ultimately, it'll be their final ruling on that, so. Any other questions on the waiver side of the house?
Do you look at, I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
if I can
please,
ask-
Brian, no, thanks.
I'm just trying to get caught up with the structure of your presentation. Typically, we look at kind of the service side versus the admin side, so you
Mhm.
collapsed all of that here,
Do you have this page?
that page?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can, so we've got the waiver service expense, the waiver revenue, so you can see
Okay, I
a plus
gotcha.
minus there, and then admin plus minus, and then we see an overall
And
surplus. So-
Brian, we did this, basically the consultants, when I was with the consultants last fall, we were trying to begin to track this. We had so many sheets of paper, we didn't know what end was up, because we learned last June what a disaster things were, actually learned early July, and this was a way that they could consolidate everything down so that we could track it on a monthly basis to see where we were, and allow us to see throughout the year the improvements that were being made and the impact of the changes that the consultants working with Charlie and the staff were undertaking. So this has been a guide for the board, a succinct way to say the policies were working and the changes that the staff and the consultants made weren't working.
Gotcha.
Okay. Any other questions regarding the waiver side? On the state side, you can see that we're projecting a surplus of 1.6 million. And obviously that one, is fairly straightforward. Usually, we are still working diligently to collect. When you look at the balance sheet, you'll see that the cash is still down on the state side. But they did release another 2.6
They just released,
2 point,
they just released our January payment. They still owe, for single stream, they still owe us February, March, April, and May. And if you look on the balance sheet, you'll see that there's an accounts receivable from DHHS. That is not any Medicaid money, that is all DHHS, and they owe us over $8 million.
so obviously the cash is declining as that receivable goes up, and we're continuing to,
That's single stream.
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of admin in it from, May and, the non-UCRs, a little bit. But our single stream is around 1.9 a month. So that's pretty much making up most of the 8 million.
So where is that? That 8 million on,
this projection is assuming that we'll get that, so those revenues are accrued.
Yes.
They're sitting in the receivable as normal.
what's the likelihood? Have you assigned a percentage to it?
We believe strongly that there,
You feel more like it now than you did last month?
yes,
Okay.
we feel pretty strongly.
I guess that goes
they're
back to
gonna
the
have
issue I
pay
raised
that.
just a minute ago, because right now that puts us $6 million net in the hole.
Mhm.
And it's gonna make it even more critical that, it looks like the Medicaid, where we, you guys have done such a great job, may have to pay back, some portion of the state, but I'm not sure I said. My understanding is this a statewide problem, so I'll pick on Brian, and your finance officer's not here, but you say that.
Yes, she
Oh, I'm
is.
sorry. Oh, I apologize, I didn't have any more, I apologize. You're facing the same issue then?
We have, I believe it's 2 months now that they're behind in paying us, and I think it's not that you won't get paid, it's when they choose to pay it. And honestly, I think it's a way for them to manage cash at the state level.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Well, how can one be 2 months behind and one be 8 months? I mean, this doesn't make any sense that they're picking and choosing who they're paying and not paying. I mean, why isn't it across the board who they're paying it all at one time?
What they do, Nancy, is they're looking at the claims we've submitted upstream and putting a value on that, and then also having us report expenditures, and then they're measuring the combination of that against your allocation and seeing if you're at a certain level, and if you are, they'll release your check. And if you aren't, then they won't release it.
But they're still late.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
they're-
kind of
they're-
the background to their decision-making around releasing the payments, given that they're gonna be late anyway.
So they prioritized claims or agencies?
Claims.
Claims and
Claims.
expenditures.
It's validation that you've used the money, I guess is the simplest way I would put it.
Part of my concern, as you can tell, is getting our books in shape as we begin to transfer, so that what we hand Smokey, we're proud of. We've done, the staff and the consultants did an amazing job over the past 12 months. And, I just want to make sure that our books are in great shape, so when we hand it to them, we're positive. I mean, even if we, the goal was always, Medicaid was the problem. State was non-Medicaid was good. Now it sounds, my concern is that it sounds more and more because of the state of North Carolina and their payment plan. And I want to make sure it's the state's problem. It's not, that's going to get to the next question, but is it likely we have wiped out that, what is now is a $6 million potential deficit by the time we transfer to Smokey? I mean, right now, we've got $2 million to the good for the last 18 months, and we're $8 million short on what the state owes us. That's $6 million to the negative. I hate that we're doing that, but I want to make sure, this leads to my question, is that because of us or because of the state? And because now Smokey's 2 months behind, but we're 4 to 6 months behind.
It's
we're not 4 months.
partial, it's
4 months.
partially, it's a combination. It's a state issue and it's a Western Highlands issue. We have not we don't do it exactly the same way that Smokey does. Let me clarify. They handle theirs a little differently. But we have not met the thresholds with claims because we have continued, and I think there'll be more on this discussion even on the waiver side today. We've continued to have problems with encounters. The encounters are there. yeah, the services have been provided, the services that we've paid for, we do have shadow claims for. The issue is getting them to clear the state system. And we have had issues around that. And some of those are on the state side, it's, MPI numbers that don't match up, it's.
Are these information we're getting presented by providers?
No, there's a discussion today.
If you can keep this at a global level now, we'll provide you a lot of detail around this later.
All right, then let me ask my global question. By the time we turn this over to Smokey, will we be at the same level of receivables in terms of the number of months as Smokey? So that when they get it, we're not handing them a problem.
It depends on, I'll say yes, but let me put a little caveat on that. It depends on what the state allows us to do in terms of moving money over to the non-UCR side. If they push back on that, we could have issues. We could potentially not clear enough encounters to get all of this money. Because of the issues on the state side and the issues on the Western Highlands side. So to be perfectly honest, I think it's likely we'll get it. We've made the request to have movement of money over to the non-UCR side. You can understand the state's not thrilled about doing that because they want those encounters to show that the services have been provided. But we can certainly prove that the encounters are there, whether they clear their system or not, and we can certainly prove that the providers have been paid. So that's the first step.
Okay.
This is a lot like the provider trying to get Western Highlands to pay them, we're trying to get the state to pay us, is that?
It's exactly, yes, thank you, Gina. It's exactly a similar
Because they're having to
thing.
march over here with their pieces of paper showing, proving that they did the service.
Exactly. And if we
All the
have,
stuff on the paper's gotta be right.
Exactly.
Yes.
The dots are in the exactly right place, and the ones need to look like ones and not sevens.
so the encounters are there, whether or not we can actually get those denied encounters to clear. It is, we've got people working diligently on each problem, so, and we've requested that movement of money. If they allow that, then it's, so, I think it's good news that they have started to release some money to us, so, even though it's not quite at the level that Smokey has right now.
Anything else on this part? Then we can get a quick overview of the budget maybe then.
Okay.
Boy, Nathan's must have hit his range.
All right, so we want to go to the 2014 budget?
Which number?
It would be item 2.
Yeah, I think I got it.
Jeff, you need one?
No, thank you.
All right, so let me just set this up a little bit for you guys so that then we can start the discussion. What we've done is we have a 12-month budget going from July 13 to June of 2014. We know that the PMPM and the state contracts will go to Smokey on October 1. We know that now. So this budget assumes that those revenues will discontinue on 9/30, but we'll have to do a run out all the way to June 30th, 2014 of the Western Highlands side. So basically, we've made assumptions in here that we know the revenues are going to end, and we're going to continue business as usual, really until probably the end of October up into November, because you're going to have, October is going to be pretty much a normal month in terms of claims and that sort of thing. There'll be some other things that will begin to staff that will begin to move to the Smokey side, but you're still going to have claims coming in at the same level. the entire month of October and probably pushing over into November a little bit. And then you're gonna start to see that wind down because you're not gonna have anything else coming in the front end. So what we tried to do is put this budget together where the expense side reflects that, to where ultimately when you get out to June 30, you basically have a skeleton run out crew. So does that make sense? So that's kind of the setup for this. And in doing that, what you ultimately end up then having to do is move, to balance the budget, you have to move fund balance. Once the revenues stop, then you obviously have to move fund balance in there to cover that run out.
Are you separating the fund balances between Medicaid and non-Medicaid?
Ultimately,
Because right now, it looks like from a year ago, we had a massive negative balance in Medicaid, and we had some in non-Medicaid. This year, from what we've just discussed, it sounds like we're gonna have it in Medicaid, and we're carrying this huge accounts receivable in non-Medicaid.
right. Ultimately, you could split that up, two sides of the balance sheet to have a certain amount. What we did is we just did a total amount for this, because obviously with the budget, we're not preparing a balance sheet. So we just said there's a total fund balance that goes toward this. There would be a portion of the fund balance, though, that should come from the state side, because there'll be state administrative functions that will occur in the run out as well.
The payable currently on the issue, I'm gonna call it single stream, and I'll be the first to admit, I really don't know what I'm talking about, other than just regurgitating words. Single stream payable from the state, that will continue to flow to Western Highlands fund balance, or our flow to Western Highlands until, or no matter what, when that is recovered.
Yes.
And that'll help on the fund balance side of the non-Medicaid fund balance side of Western Highlands then.
Well, assuming that we close the books in June, very, very certain that we're gonna get the rest of that money, not
Right.
having to book an allowance or anything like that, then the fund balance would already be there. Then you would just have, as the money comes in, you would settle the receivables. So the fund balance would be intact unless we end up having to book a reserve or, reverse those revenues. So as that money comes in, it would simply satisfy the receivable. So the cash would go up on the state side and the receivable would go down. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you're facing a very difficult situation in developing a budget. I really recognize that you're looking at 1/4 year of operations initially, and then you've got, because we have so much of a tail, as we say, for workers' comp, of claims coming in so much later that have to be, if they were incurred during the first quarter, they have to be paid with revenues paid by the first quarter. They don't actually flow through, even though Smokey will be managing it after October 1. They won't be fiscally liable for it until we actually do the final merger, which I guess Charlie Bryan, check, we're looking at potentially July 1/14 for the final merger of Smestern, Wilkie, or whatever it's going to be called. So,
Well,
Yeah, we hope it'll all be done by then.
yeah.
actually, specific to the merger and some of this discussion you're having, I don't want to sidetrack you, but there's a lot of awareness in the General Assembly that this is not the last time this is going to happen, if you follow me. And they're setting parameters around how these transitions from a financial perspective need to occur. And there's a bill right now, Senate Bill 208, that has a lot of language around exactly what we're talking about to try to provide guidance around how this happens. Now, also in there is the opportunity essentially to do the mergers before the end of the fiscal year. So there's just a lot more awareness that, that's just an arbitrary date that doesn't serve anyone. So there'll be a lot of what we're facing is going to be framed more specifically.
And I think, here's the issue, let me just lay it on the table. 12 months ago, we had handed a budget. 2 weeks later, it was $4.5 million out of whack. We got handed a piece of paper which a lot of us looked at and said, okay, that's cool, we trust you. And we were told, sorry, what we told you wasn't true. And we had to this board had to take very drastic action very quickly. But in all frankness, I have no idea if this paper is any more true than it was 12 months ago, except that you're presenting it. And the question I have to you is, do you feel comfortable that these numbers are correct and the board is not being placed in the same position it was 12 months ago? Second question is, would you feel comfortable to sit down, if you haven't already, to go through this budget with Smokey CFO and make sure the Smokey CFO is as comfortable as you are with it?
Oh, absolutely. The answer is yes and yes.
And I'll be, to the finance committee, I feel very uncomfortable even recommending this budget to the board for adoption today until such time it has been reviewed by the Smokey CFO, and you two are very comfortable that these numbers work for what we have and where we're going.
Absolutely, and we'll be glad to do that. And that will also give us a little bit, we've also got staffing plans. We had, by statute, we had to give this to you guys by a certain date. And we've got staffing plans rolling out, et cetera, so we can even fine tune it a little bit more as we do that.
And I would leave it to the board's discretion, Mr. Chairman, whether we should actually adopt a budget today or, contingent upon that review, or whether the board wants to come back later in the month following that review, a recommendation by both finance officers.
When do we have to approve it by?
June 30.
Okay.
Well, I'd also like to say,
28th.
got a lot of upset CFAC because by statute, this is supposed to be presented to us before it even comes to the board. And we have not had anybody come to us at all. We got an email on Friday after we met saying that they either weren't ready for us on Wednesday. I don't know, but I got an email and I sent it out to CFAC, and I've got some really angry CFAC right now because this was not presented to us even before it came to the board. And, so somehow or another, we have another one at the end of,
You have another one at the end of this month. Dick, I had communicated with Dick on several occasions, Nancy, and was asking him about it, and he was trying to get in touch with you.
Well, that's funny because I've talked to Dick off and on, and Dick sent me the email after our board meeting. And he was sitting in our board meeting and nothing was presented to us, and we got the email after our board meeting. And this is what's very upsetting to CFAC is that if you've been communicating to Dick, he knows how to pick the phone up, he knows my phone number, he can reach me 24/7 because his phone's never off and it never leaves my side. So this is where CFAC's very frustrated because if Sharon's been communicating, it didn't get to CFAC. And we even redid our meeting out from Monday to Wednesday because of Memorial Day. Or whatever day it was, yeah. And I'm so confused now. So it is frustrating that, and that's why I told CFAC I would be here today. And if I have to call another meeting to get this, get them in, I will. But, it's
Well,
difficult.
I hope you'll do. I appreciate that, and I understand what your concerns, and it's not a throwaway line. I understand what you're concerned about. Just so I know you understand the concerns of board members about the budget.
Yes, I do.
I hope you'll make those comments during the public hearing on the budget, which is scheduled for this morning, and that would be the appropriate time to make those. In addition to now, which I'm just saying, make sure those go on the record. Then I think that will impact the board, and I'm not saying the board won't move forward with approval
I
of
agree.
contingency or just ask for a report back. This board is so meetinged out like everybody else.
I
And then they go,
understand, so are
we're so
we.
sick of meeting this year that, one more is just gonna send us over the edge. But we also wanna know to make sure that this has been coordinated, it's got, lots of eyes on it, so we're not facing a repeat of what we saw last year.
I agree, and
The
that's
other-
what CFAC wants.
The other concern I have is, normally we would spend a lot of time talking about salary adjustments and all those kinds of things. I only ask that whatever we're doing here, with our budget, be coordinated with Smokey so that our salary adjustments, benefit packages, things of that nature are, we're not doing something that's not in line with what they're doing. And that's just a pure coordination comment more than a question, because if you try and explain it all to me, I'll be lost and Chuck will be mad because I know he wants to have a closed session before we go to the regular board meeting. So, so I guess I just implore and please make sure that we're coordinated on that, so that, because I understand a lot of our staff is transitioning to Smokey, and so we want to make sure for the employees that's as seamless as possible, and, you know, to the extent that we can take advantage of having two budgets, let's do it, but let's coordinate the two coming together. That's, this is I know I'm talking like a county manager or that I'm more than a board member, but please. That's what I say.
Well, if you want, I'll talk just like a county manager if I can, try to reassure folks a little bit, and just, you know, it's a little, I don't want to say awkward, but, you know, on paper and for real, I'm your CEO now.
Right.
Okay? And our relationship is evolving very quickly. So what I would say to everyone here is that, you know, the reality of a budget is that it's the best effort at the time.
Right.
And there's no sense saying anything different. Given all the factors associated with being where we are now, this is the best that can be done today. That's why there's budget amendments. The budget amendments don't address a $4 or $5 million oops.
Yeah.
Okay? Now,
But
there is nobody in this room that cares more about this than us, right? I mean, think about it. I understand how important it is for all of you to do good work and fairly represent things. We don't have anything better to say about this today. If we did, we would. Because at the end of the day, we're the ones, you know, owning this thing. So there's a lot of effort that is being put in, and we don't have anywhere near enough time to talk about that, but to do, and you know, to be more discussion about kind of our due diligence, you know, around this and other elements that are driving this. So again, you're not alone with your concern, okay? So again, if we accept that this is kind of a living, breathing document, I mean, just like it is for Smokey, you know, we're making our best. It's a model, it's a projection, really. A budget is a plan. And as we become more intelligent about that, we make adjustments to it. Now, do we foresee making a multi-million-dollar adjustment? I would say no.
I hope not.
So,
Only thing hiding in this budget is, hiding is not the right word, is the fact that we don't know that the state's gonna pay those state funds.
but
And that's-
we're all,
but we
we're
all
all
know
in the
that.
same, we're all in the same lifeboat.
But the
I
vote-
wouldn't get hung up
Well, I
on
know,
that.
but last year,
Okay.
there was something hiding in that budget that was not
Okay.
out. So that's the only hiding thing in this budget, and it's out. Is what I'm
This is
saying.
different.
Yeah,
This
it-
is very,
well-
very, very different than that, okay? We're fully aware of that, and we're addressing that.
Right, that's what I'm saying, but we know that up front. We didn't
Right.
know that up front on this, but on the previous budget, so now we know, and so we're dealing with that. So there's no other smokes in the other one.
No, there weren't.
Okay.
you have any questions on the budget? I mean, Chuck, any questions on the budget?
I would like to add that if you looked at the narrative, and if you look at the attachment A, which is item number
2C. Pardon? 2C.
2C,
Is this what you're talking about?
yes, 2C.
It was in green.
Because Western Highlands is not going to be receiving any funding after September 30, and we will be ceasing operations and start the closeout of Western Highlands as an organization. There were some board designated funds, as you all are aware. One was for provider network stabilization. That is not going to be a factor for board designation in the future. So in essence, what I've done is zeroed out all of the board designation and moved into, appropriated into the operating budget, the $251,000, which is the old Rutherford dissolution funds, plus some unspent MOE funds,
My pebble in your
because
shoe.
that,
My
that-
pebble in your shoe.
Yes. In addition to that, we had calculated an estimated 3.304 million from fund balance for the closeout going through whenever the closeout is, whether it is June 30 or whether it's March 31 or whatever date. But those are the two things that I needed you to see.
And this is in non-Medicaid side, or is this is all non-Medicaid side here, right?
Yes.
So the total fund balance appropriated is out of how much fund balance at the beginning of the year? Estimated fund balance of non-Medicaid. So this is 3.55 of non-Medicaid fund balance. What's the starting non-Medicaid fund balance that we're taking this out of?
Actually, if you look on the administrative side of the budget, we use a cost allocation plan, that we have given to DMA and the state, and it's based on revenues. So our cost allocation plan is based on revenues. The expenses that we're going to have in closeout and the first 3 months of operations in administration is based on that cost allocation plan, which is currently 84-16, 84 Medicaid, 16 non-Medicaid. And so as far as the fund balance appropriated, it's going to be appropriated on each side. And I can tell you how much it is. So you've got fund balance appropriated for closeout. If you're looking at item 2B, if you're looking at item 2B, you're going to see 5 columns. Okay? You need to focus on the last 2 columns to the right. The 4th column is July through September operations. That's where we're getting all of our revenue from DMA, from our PMPM, and the state. And you will see that October through June, that the only amount in the revenues is the appropriated fund balance to cover the run out and the closeout of an organization for whenever it occurs. The first 2 columns, that is the split, 1684. Based on our revenues and the cost allocation plan that we'd submitted to DMA. That cost allocation, it has changed 3 times. We started out 80-20. Then we went, then 6 months later, when we had a reduced budget on the state side, it went to 1981. And then when we got a big increase in our PMPM in January, it went 84% Medicaid and 16% state.
So if you look at line 3, you've got $524,000 basically on the state side, $2.7 million on the Medicaid side that'll get spent for the closeout. And that's your 3.3. The issue may be, I know where you're going with this,
Thank you.
there may not be $2.7 million on the state side.
Thank you. That's what's got me nervous.
Yes, there may not be. I mean on the Medicaid side. So that difference would have to come from the state side. If you don't end up with a net gain of 2.7. Now, you do have, what you gotta remember is you've got 3 months going into October where you will continue to have a positive.
You'll have
Yes.
surplus during
You'll have
that time.
surplus during those 3 months.
Well, I think it is, you sit down with the finance officer from
Mhm.
Smokey and you walk through, because we're turning this over to them ostensibly July 1
Mhm.
next year. We're walking through, and hopefully we will leave the liability on the Medicaid side, which belongs to the state, understaffed by law.
Mhm.
So they have to presumably wipe that out before it goes to Smokey. That's the goal.
Mhm.
So that we hand Smokey a positive on the state side, and we transfer them the strongest, cleanest money we can.
Mhm.
And that's kind of, as I've said since April, since this became coming down, it's been my goal as we walk through this transition, is give them the cleanest money possible and hand the liability off to the state because the state caused it.
Right.
We're gonna wanna look next month at, Senate Bill 208. Because a lot of what we're talking about is gonna be legislated.
Yeah, and they're playing games with it big time with that legislation. And I mean, there's stuff in there that's just absurd, like the county advisory committee that just needs to be deleted from it. But,
Anyway,
yeah.
a lot of
Can we
what,
get
a
ahead
lot
of
of
that
what, pardon
If
me?
we can get ahead of that bill and do it the way it should be
They're,
done.
they're ramrodding that. We're,
Well, let me speak to you about that.
Mr. Chairman, anything else on?
No.
Mr. Chairman would recommend that we go, do you want this committee to go into closed session? I recommend this committee go into closed session for the purpose of personnel, I guess is it, that's.
Budget matter. Budget.
Can't.
We can-
Well,
Attorney Klein.
I can attorney time
Who's the attorney here?
Don't have one.
Your
Can
board
we get,
attorney in the other
can we
room.
get
Attorney, you get
Danny Vick in here then?
You good, Vicky?
Yeah.
There'll be a consultation with legal counsel.
Personnel as it affects the budget.
And who do you want in here then? Is that
Uh,
Vic?
Then, before you do that really quickly, there was also the final budget for 2013. And what that was is recognizing the new PMPM we got in February. We had already recognized the one in January. We got a new one in February for DOJ. In addition to that, there's several allocation letters that came in, just got one day before yesterday. But anyway, this is the final year-end 2013 budget cleanup and
Gotcha.
finishing it up. And there's a detailed report and, you know, if regardless of the 2014 budget, that, you know, if we could go ahead and approve the final one for June of the current year, that would be great.
Can we get the language you need to do that? We just did that yesterday afternoon, it's actually there. That's the language you need to clean up your line items for the 12-13 budget, is what you're talking about, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
And to
can we get that
include-
language for the board meeting? And because I understand exactly what you're talking about. Okay, just give me that motion language if you could,
Okay.
thanks.
Yeah, I got Christina, Diane, Steve, Ryan, Charlie.
Along with Vic, okay.
Good morning.
Motion to go into closed session for attorney consultation with legal counsel. I'll move it, someone second it.
So what the motion would be,
Consultation with legal
It was
counsel,
dry.
143, 318, 11,
A, 3, and 6.
A, 3 and 6.
But do you want to also just make it just for consultation with attorney or personnel or anything like that? Or-
Mr. Chairman?
Just attorney.
Okay, so it'd be A3.
A3.
Anticipated action.
So moved.
No.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. We're closed, we can go to closed session.
And